Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Don't know what's going on with the YouTube. It keeps going over and over and over.
Rabbi, all right, everyone.
Hello, Kent.
Hey, Kent.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Kent. Can't see you.
Why did my resume share? Okay, I don't know what's going on with the YouTube, but so be it.
That's better. We got it, Rabbi.
Do you?
Yeah.
And it says it's live on YouTube.
Yeah, but it. Okay. Let's get moving because got a lot to get through, and I hope you have been keeping up with these complex laws of Shabbos. Not the easiest subject matter to get through, so we will do our best. And chapter 8. So we go through quite a few of the 39 forbidden labors, starting with plowing, hachodesh. One who plows even the slightest amount of earth is liable. Even a seed in a tiny hole would be liable. So what liable means that if you do it deliberately, brazenly, flagrantly, with witnesses warning you not to do it, and you say, I have you fapak, you will be committing a capital crime. If you do it accidentally, inadvertently, you forgot it's Shabbos, or you didn't realize that this was forbidden, then in the olden days of the temple, you would have to bring a sin offering. One who weeds around the roots of trees, cuts off grasses or prunes shoots to beautify the land, all derivatives of plowing. So pruning is also a problem. So if you're walking around your garden on Shabbos, don't pick anything off. Save it for after Shabbos. Similarly, leveling the surface of a field. So that's usually how people plant and things, and that's plowing, really. Okay, then one who levels cavities in the ground. Likewise, all things that one does when they're plowing to prepare for planting, or sowing, rather. The next one is zoreya, sowing. Even the slightest amount is liable. Pruning a tree so that it grows performs an activity resembling sowing. In contrast, watering plants and trees on Shabbos is a derivative of sowing. So whether it's a derivative or not, there's Av Melocha, there's the primary 39 forbidden labors, and then there's lots of derivatives, offshoots, auxiliary prohibitions of them. Soaking seeds of wheat, barley, and water, derivative of sowing, liable for the slightest amount. Number 3, koitzer. Koitzer is reaping. Okay, so now you've plowed and you planted, and now you're already doing a harvest. You're getting some things that grew. You may not do the reaping on Shabbos. Now, in all the laws of Shabbos, there's a minimum amount, minimum measurements in order to be liable. Now, again, by rabbinic law, you shouldn't do anything. But by biblical law, to be liable, as we said before, you would have to do a minimum measure. So, for example, have you done writing yet?
No.
No, I haven't got. Okay, so we'll get to writing. Writing, you have to write 2 letters to be liable. 1 letter is not enough. If you ask the rabbis, you're allowed to write 1 letter on Shabbos? The answer is no. But if you already did it, are you liable? You're not liable unless you did 2 letters. If you, in the laws of carrying out the transporting from one domain to another, have you done those yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so you'll get there. So again, every object, there's a minimum amount that it has to be a viable amount for the purpose for which that item is used. If it's a tiny thing which has no viability and no usability, then you're not liable. Again, should you do it? No, you shouldn't do it. But if you did it, you wouldn't be liable if it's less than the measure. So what is the measurement, the minimum measurement for reaping? He says an amount the size of a dried fig. A dried fig, somewhere I saw what that means in our terms. Kizayit, no, zayit and olive, fig. I can't give it to you in metric amounts, but obviously it's not too big. Plucking fruit is a derivative of reaping. So also, that's the minimum size to be liable. Removing produce from where it's growing is also reaping. Even if it's not from the ground, even if it's grass growing from a rock, a parasite plant growing on shrubs, or grass is growing on a barrel, if this is the place where these things grow, then you may not pluck it or reap it. In contrast, this is an interesting one. You remove fruit from a plant growing in a flower pot. So in the Gemara and Shabbos, it talks about 2 different kinds of flower pots. There's a flower pot that has perforated holes, and you put it on the ground, so it's connected to the ground. It's drawing nutrients from the ground. That's the same as if you're plucking off the ground or off the tree. But if it's a loose, independent flower pot with a solid bottom, and it's sitting on a ledge of your balcony or something, it's not directly on the earth, then it's different. So he says, if it's from a flower pot that is not perforated, not onto the ground, not connected to the ground, then you're not liable. If the flower pot has a hole, the size, even a small size of a small root, it's considered as growing in the ground. And if you pick fruit from the flower pot, because it's connected to the ground, it's like picking from the ground. Whenever reaping, number 4, from a plant causes it to grow larger, like beets, if you harvest it without knowing of the prohibition, you're liable for 2 sin offerings, because you did 2 things at once. What were the 2 violations? 1, you performed the labor of reaping, and 1, you perform the labor of planting, because it's for the purpose of planting. Similarly, a person who prunes a tree and wants to use the branches he prunes to replant is liable for reaping and planting. Let's skip here. When figs have dried out while on the tree, other fruits have already dried out. If you pick them on Shabbos, you're liable, even though in the laws of Tumah, they're considered already detached if they are dried out. You're not going to really be eating them if they dry it out, but you're still liable. Now, if you intend pruning and uprooting chicory or moist shoots, if you intend to use them as food for human beings, again, there has to be a minimum measurement. What is that? The size of a dried fig. If you go to the bottom, number 18, he might tell you what that is in our language. A dried fig, a modern contemporary quantity. We can look just now. If you're doing it for animals, then an animal has a bigger mouth than a human being, generally. I know some human beings who have pretty big jaws, but halachically, we consider animals to have bigger jaws, bigger mouths than human beings. So the minimum measurement to feed an animal would likewise be larger. So for a human being, it's a dried fig. For an animal, it would be the amount necessary to fill the mouth of a young kid. That's a young goat, which is presumably significantly larger than a dried fig. If it's for kindling, then it's the amount necessary to cook an egg. Why? Because for kindling, what are you going to kindle? What are you going to burn? What are you going to cook? You have to cook something viable, something that's significant enough to bother eating. Similar measures apply for collecting food. Okay, it's not collecting food from your cupboard, but collecting things from on the ground, from on a farm or something. Okay, now when we say the size of an egg, now you go shopping for eggs, you go to Woolies or you go to Pick and Pay, and your wife sends you shopping, and you say, and she says, "Get me 2 dozen eggs." You say, "What size eggs do you want me to get? Medium, jumbo, extra large?" So when we're measuring the size of an egg for these halachic purposes, what size egg are we looking at? There's all different kinds. So for sure, we're not talking about ostrich eggs. We're talking about chicken eggs. And he says the average size chicken egg. So what would you say an average size chicken egg? Does that mean medium or large? How many sizes in eggs are there? Is there small? I don't do much shopping. Is it medium, or does it start with large? Large, extra large, and jumbo?
Rabbi, I would say large.
Finally, we have an expert to help us. Okay, madam, tell us.
Don't know about expert. At home, we always use the extra large eggs because they're the best for baking. But I think most people would use either large or extra large.
What is the smallest size available in the shops?
I think it's medium.
Medium. So if it's a medium,
Yes.
large, extra large, and jumbo.
And jumbo. Yes, and jumbo. We hardly ever use jumbo.
Okay, so he says the medium, he doesn't necessarily mean medium, but he says medium meaning the average type of thing.
I think these days.
Which Pick and Pay did Rambam go to, Rabbi?
Okay, so he says that whenever the term man will cook an egg, important the size of a dry average size. Average size. So it doesn't say medium or light, it says average size. So I think all of the I think for sure medium, large, and extra large would all apply.
In the notes,
Okay, let's move on to next.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi, in the notes, they talk about 57.6 cubic centimeters. Now, whether that's medium, large, jumbo, or whatever, I wouldn't know.
That's why I didn't quote that, because it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Number 6, if you collect figs and make a chain from them, or pass a hole through dates and pass a string through them, I guess that's how they used to collect them in the olden days. Then you have performed a derivative of the forbidden labor of collecting sheaves. Number 7, threshing. Okay, threshing applies only with regard to the earth's produce, and the minimum amount would be the size of a dried fig. Extracting produce from its shell is a derivative of threshing. Similarly, a person who milks an animal is liable for extracting food. This is an interesting subject. I want to spend a moment on this. Milking the cow. Okay, you have a cow. You're not allowed to milk your cow on Shabbos. Now, do you know, the little bit I know about this is that it could be quite painful for a cow not to be milked if it has to be milked. Now, we have a mitzvah not to cause pain to animals. So we have the law of Shabbos conflicting with the law of not causing pain to animals. So what do? So there's a simple solution. It's called the Shabbos Goy. You have a non-Jew who you organize to do the milking on Shabbos. Now there's a whole question, may a Jew drink the milk from a cow that was milked on Shabbos? That's another whole question. Now it's not so practical today because I don't think any of the people in this year have a cow in their garden. But let's go to Israel. You know, Tnuva is a gigantic dairy company in Israel. I think it's a public company. I think they were recently bought out. They were going to be bought out by an international company. It's a massive company, Tnuva. They make beautiful dairy products. You go to a hotel in Israel and you enjoy the breakfast in the hotel. It's unbelievable. And lots of Tnuva products. How does a big company manage to keep the law in Israel? So there was a big debate about this when Israel was being founded. Rav Kook, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine before 1948, the Chazon Ish, many of the leading rabbis of the early days before Israel was founded and after the establishment of the state, when they're just establishing dairy companies, on the one hand, they wanted to give employment to Jews. It's supposed to be a Jewish state for the Jewish people. We must employ Jews. So here the rabbis are telling them, no, you have to employ non-Jews, you have to employ some Arabs to do the milking on Shabbos. It was a big debate, halachic debate, political debate. Anyway, so some of the solutions are, as we said, to have non-Jews doing the milking on Shabbos. Today they have another solution. Who can think what it is? Today it's all automated.
Automated. Yeah.
Today it's all mechanized, automated. So you set it before Shabbos and it's organized. Maybe they have non-Jewish labor to get them in there, but it's the automation has made it a lot easier halachically. Okay, now wounding an animal that has a hide is liable for extracting. What are you extracting? The blood that flows from the wound. But if he's not doing it for the blood, then he's not liable because it's destructive. One of the laws of Shabbos, you may have learned that in the beginning. One of the principles, I think last week the chief rabbi touched on this, that one of the principles of Shabbos is that it has to be a constructive thing. It has to be a positive thing, that you want to do something, create something. Here, if it's destructive, you're just wounding the animal for whatever reason. Maybe it's an animal which is bothering you or threatening you. So then you're not liable. Now, who does this apply to? When does this apply? An animal, a wild beast, a fowl, or the like. But if you wound a fellow human being, by contrast, then you're liable even though your intent is to injure. Here's a very interesting lesson in human nature. It's quite sad, actually. Ironic. If you're having a fight with someone and you give him a clap, you feel better after you gave him a clap. You got it out of your system, right? You got rid of some of your adrenaline. That's a positive thing. You have healed your own anger. You have calmed yourself down. You have healed yourself from being angry, and therefore it's considered somewhat constructive, even though it's a negative act, and we certainly don't encourage people to hit each other. But if you did it, you're going to be liable, because of what, even though it was destructive in that you're hitting someone, it was constructive because you're causing your own anger to subside. Number 9, Shmoyne Shrotzim, 8 creepy crawlies. There are 8 halachic creepy animals, vermin, whose carcasses convey ritual impurity. So they're mentioned in the laws of Tumah. And he says here that these 8 creeping animals have hides whose status is analogous to those of animals and fowl, and therefore, if you wound them, you're not liable. Just for your information, the 8 creepy animals are the weasel, the mouse, the ferret, the hedgehog, the chameleon, the lizard, the snail, and the mole. Number 10, this is also something relevant. A person who squeezes fruit to extract its juice is liable for extracting. So you got these delicious sweet oranges. Can you squeeze yourself a nice glass of orange juice before you go to shul on Shabbos morning? The answer is no. You should not be squeezing fruit juice on Shabbos. But hang on, I'm sure I saw the Rebbitzin squeezing lemon juice into the salad when I was a guest there last Shabbos. How did she get away with that? So this is an interesting distinction. So let's look here. It is, however, permitted to squeeze a cluster of grapes directly into food. Since a liquid that is absorbed into food is considered as food, thus one is considered to be extracting food from food, but not into a vessel. So it has to go directly onto the food. So if you squeeze the lemon directly into the salad, that's kosher. That's actually one of the other arguments about milking the cow. One of the creative solutions that one of the rabbis back in the 40s in Israel was put some food, bread or something, under the cow. Don't milk it into a bucket, milk it into some bread that they could make a concoction with bread and milk, which would be a loophole. He says here, sorry, similarly, one who milks directly into food. Yeah, it's only if it's into a container. Number 11. Winnowing, separating an amount of food the size of a dried fig is liable. Causing milk to curdle is a derivative of separating. Separating the dregs from liquids, also liable. Now he mentions 3 different things. Winnowing, separating, and sifting. Why would they reckon there's 3 separate categories? Because every labor that was born in the Mishkan, remember the 39 forbidden labors on Shabbos are derived from where? From the 39 activities that were performed in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, in the days of Moshe, and when they had to trap animals and use herbs and writing and building and baking. All of those things are derived from what they did in the sanctuary in those days. Number 12, separating. This is a difficult one. This is a very hard one. a lot of technical laws in this, and in yeshiva we studied the chapter on separating food at great length, and I must say it's a lifelong study, the laws of Shabbos. But let's talk a little bit about it, so at least we have a basic familiarity. Number 12, separating food from unwanted matter. One who separates one type of food from another food using a sifter or a strainer is liable. Using a tray or a pot with the compartments, which is not a usual way of doing it, is not liable. Permitted to separate food by hand to eat immediately. But look at 13. This is the complicated part. Separating unwanted matter from food is liable, even if it does so using only one hand. Separating food from unwanted matter. Okay, I'm going to talk about it in a moment. Let's just finish this. Two types of food mixed together. You may separate one from the other, place it aside to eat immediately, but not for later on. Okay, so now, let's say, so you may not separate unwanted matter from food. Okay, so you're sitting at the Friday night Shabbos meal, and you're about to enjoy the piping hot chicken soup. And maybe if you're lucky, you got a knedel or some pierogin in the soup as well. And then suddenly some unwanted matter falls into the soup. A fly, a mosquito. Now, nobody wants to eat the fly. In fact, you could be liable for 5 or 6 biblical prohibitions if you eat a flying creature. But that's not for now. But even if it was kosher, who wants to eat it? So the simple thing would be take out the fly, yeah? Well, I know many people, they would not just take out the fly, they would throw out the whole plate. They're not going to eat. I don't want to have soup where the fly was swimming around my soup, doing the backstroke, or who knows what else he was doing in there. But let's say you're a poor person and you can't afford to spill out this plate of soup. You need the soup. So the next best is you take out the fly. But it's not so simple. You may not just take out the fly, because you'd be separating unwanted matter from food. So if you're comfortable having the soup minus the fly, the trick is like this. You take a big tablespoon and you ladle out a full tablespoon of soup and make sure the fly is in the spoon. So you're taking out soup with the fly, not just picking out the fly. So picking out the fly alone is prohibited, but the solution is to take out some soup and make sure the fly is in that spoon with the soup that you take out. Then you may carry on enjoying the soup if you can still enjoy it.
Rabbi, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
Would this also apply to, say, peeling an orange?
No, you're allowed to peel an orange on Shabbos.
And what about taking a peanut out of its shell? I'm just trying to understand this.
Okay. So now you're getting hot. Nuts is more complicated than oranges. So peeling a fruit, whether it's an orange or an archie or a banana, is no problem on Shabbos.
And Rabbi, what about taking grapes off the stalk? You're eating the grape straight away, but you're leaving the stalk, which is inedible.
You're talking off the tree, off the vine?
No, off a bunch of grapes.
In your house?
Yes.
No problem. But nuts are more complicated. Nuts need a more fuller treatment, which we don't have time for now because it's already 1:30 and we're not there yet. Let me just say so that fruit is not a problem. Nuts, it depends which nuts, but someone else will deal with nuts one of these days. Stick around. Okay, 14, filtering the dregs from wine, oil, water, liable. Okay, so filtering is a problem. because you're separating. You're separating the good from the bad or the bad from the good. Okay, we buy mustard in a jar, but in the olden days they had to mix mustard on Friday. If you mix mustard on Friday, one may stir it by hand or with a utensil to make it fit to drink on the Shabbos. I guess it was a liquid mustard. Similarly, while wine is in the process of fermentation, one may pour out a barrel of wine together with the dregs over handkerchiefs. So you're filtering it in a sense, but this kind of filtering is permissible. 15, a person who grinds in a mountain. Okay, grinding, this is a new labor. Grinding is forbidden because in the planting, they would plow, then they would sow, then they would reap, then they would mill, then they would grind, then they would bake. So grinding is a problem, the size of a dried fig. Crushing spices or herbs in a mortar is performing the labor of grinding and is held liable. Guess what, guys? Unless you really need it, you're not supposed to take medicine on Shabbos. Did you know that? So again, that's another whole shear. But basically, one shouldn't take medicine if you can avoid it on Shabbos. For example, I have a certain pill I take once a day. So the doctor prescribed me to take it in the morning. But I said, I don't want to take it on Shabbos. I said, can I take it in the afternoon? He said, yeah, take it in the afternoon. Fine. So I take it before Shabbos. So if you can avoid it, sometimes it's unavoidable. But if you can avoid it, we prefer not to have medicine on Shabbos. And the reason is here. Here's the reason. Crushing spices or herbs in a mortar is like grinding. How did they make medicines in the old days? What's the symbol of a chemist? Dave, are you a chemist?
Mortar and pestle.
Mortar and pestle, thank you very much. The mortar and pestle, they would crush the herbs, whatever, to make powder, to make medicine. So if we take medicine on Shabbos, we're afraid. It was obviously, maybe today we're not so afraid, but in the olden days, they were afraid, the rabbis were afraid that you would start grinding. Let's move to 16 as we're out of time. Sifting flour. Also the amount of a dried fig. Kneading flour. So challah has to be baked on Friday, not on Shabbos. So the sifting and the kneading is problematic on Shabbos. Mixing earth for use as a cement. When you make a dough, you're taking flour and water and you're kneading it together. It's like making cement. So mixing earth for use as a cement is a derivative of kneading. They didn't make cement in the sanctuary, but they did knead dough in the sanctuary for the breads. How much is liable? The amount necessary to make a crucible for a goldsmith. That was the minimum necessary, because a goldsmith worked in very small fine, because gold is so expensive. You work in tiny little pieces of gold. Whereas other professions, you have big crucibles. So that's the minimum measurement. Mixing cement cannot be performed ash, coarse, and brown alike because it doesn't mix properly. So if it mixes properly and becomes one unit, one entity, then you're liable. If it doesn't, then you're not liable. Okay, so I would encourage you to go through the footnotes. We don't have time for it now. There's quite a lot. 79 footnotes in all. So if you have time during the course of the day or the week, I'll leave that to you guys. Any questions before we sign off?
So, Rabbi, if I can ask, if we can get back to the cow. Just to be clear, if there are two Torah laws in contradiction with each other, it becomes a question of intentionality then. Because I'm leading the cow to the milking machine to milk it. The cow doesn't go itself. But I'm leading. It's going to be milked with the intention of saving it from suffering, not from the milking.
So we have to find a way of not causing pain to the animal. while at the same time not having a Jew violate Shabbos. So therefore, the two solutions, well, three solutions were either using a non-Jew or using machinery, or
Yeah, but
or milking it into some food which could be useful.
but the cow doesn't go by itself to the machinery. It has to be led. For the
Now,
intention of.
can I come in here, Rabbi?
If you know more about dairies than I do, please do.
I spent 3 years milking cows on Kibbutz Sorah in the 70s.
Refect.
Okay, we got an expert. Yay!
Yeah, refect expert.
So we had to milk 3 times a day, 365 days a year. In some cases, we had mitnadvim from countries that where they were not Jewish, but in most cases, there was Jewish people milking on Shabbos and milking on Yom Kippur and whenever it was. The cow knows exactly when 3 times a day it has to what's called drop its milk. It stands up and it goes to the gate. All you have to do is open that gate and it goes into the milking parlor by themselves, and they go in the same order every time. That's how you know when you've got a sick cow, because if Daphne number 922 comes in 5th every day and she stays at the back, you know she's sick and she's got something called deleket in one of her udders. The machinery, while it might be automatic, still has to be put on by a human. The machinery doesn't attach itself because you have to check and clean each teat and squirt the milk out to check there is no deleket in either of the 4 quarters. Now, when I did this, I had no knowledge of Yiddishkeit, kashrut, or anything. I was a 19-year-old Reform Jew from Temple Shalom who knew nisht. So I never thought about it, but these things have been going through my head ever since we started doing these shiurim. And I wondered also, you talked about tenuva, the truck would come and it would mix milk that was milked by one lot of kibbutznikim on one kibbutz with another 5 kibbutzim. So there is a whole lot of things here that are knocking on the door of each other, so to speak, with regard to all these laws. And it's very interesting. I'm going to try and find out more about this because I did it for all those years.
I was looking it up today in anticipation of the shir, and I saw that tenuva has some milk that is mahadrim, which means for the more scrupulous, and they make sure not to give them milk which was milked on Shabbos.
Okay, well, maybe they do separate it.
And I can only imagine that the kibbutz that you were on was obviously not a religious kibbutz, but there are some religious kibbutzim.
Yeah.
And there are dairy farms that are run with a hechsher and have rabbinic supervision and would make a plan to do this in accordance with halacha, even though it's definitely an imposition and an inconvenience, and life would be a lot easier if they didn't have to worry about it. But especially on Yom Tovim.
There was another issue that cropped up once in a while, thank goodness not too often, which was when, and this could have been on Shabbos or any other day, when the cows broke out of their enclosure and half the kibbutz had to run around and try to collect the cows and get them back. It's one thing chasing chickens, but do you try and chase a cow and get it back to where you want it? Not so easy.
Well,
and that normally it could happen on Shabbos.
One of the other 39 forbidden labors of Shabbos happens to be trapping an animal.
Yeah, so there is so much involved here. I'm just so thankful I'm not on the kibbutz anymore.
Okay, guys, I'm going to have to beg off now. I've got another appointment, so be well. Good to have you.
Thank you, Terry.
Bye-bye. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks,
I
guys.
thank you all for your contributions and for your help. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.